I feel like I'm supposed to, well, feel a ton of things, like either epically hyped and mind blown and stuff like that, but after 1044, I just feel happy. Hello and welcome to the Grand Line Review, your source for everything One Piece. My name is Liam and I know that this is a very high standard, but I think this chapter is the single best experience of One Piece that I've ever had. And you know, I usually do an out of context summary, but the problem here is that there is nothing I can do to make this chapter sound even wackier than it already is, so for a special time only, the in context summary of chapter 1044 is as follows. Luffy is a cartoon god. Various old men are afraid of cartoons. Meanwhile, Kaido is a bit cartoon neutral and doesn't seem to mind his eyes popping out of his skull, so long as he continues to get the beating that his submissive side craves ever so much. Just like my dog craves pats, and luckily 1 times pat will be awarded for every person who subscribes to the channel as a result of this video. Do not leave this good boy hanging, he needs his pats. But now Luffy is a certified raid legend, and speaking of, this video is sponsored by Raid Shadow Legends, the game that exists and has swept the mobile world by storm. I've been playing Raid for a fair bit now, and one of the main champions I've been using is Ignatius, primarily because I enjoy his fancy name juxtaposed against this beautiful mess of molten metal. Basically, he hits things hard, like really hard. And when I'm sick of wanton destruction, I generally turn to Abyss, because I absolutely love anyone who has the sheer self-confidence to wear a crown into battle. But what I like most about the game is the sheer diversity of champions available, and that you can mix and match them to craft all sorts of unholy combinations. Or I guess holy combinations if that's what you're into. There's never been a better time to get started, and if you use my link or scan the QR code right here, new players will get a free starter pack worth almost $30 to kickstart your game. We're talking a free champion Terrell, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and 1 ancient shard, so that you can summon an awesome champion as soon as you get in the game. You will find these rewards here in your inbox for the next 30 days only. Once you're in, you can find me in-game under the name Grand Line Guy, and if you're fast, you can join my clan. And it's that easy. Just click the link in the description, and I'll see you in the game. Back to you, me. Thanks, also me. So let's talk about the biggest event that has ever happened in the world of fictional pirates. Luffy is a mythical Zoan, the Hito no Mi model Nika. And to be perfectly honest, it definitely feels weird saying that, almost like I'm reading some sort of fan fiction, really. And I think right now I'm mostly in a state of shock. I mean, I absolutely loved everything about this chapter, but One Piece will never be the same again after having read it. The next time I go back and reread the series, I won't just be seeing a delightful rubber lad having adventures with his kind of lackluster yet very well used fruit powers. What I'll be seeing are the beginnings of a god, and that's something I feel is going to take a while to come to terms with. And it also, just on a meta note, it pretty heavily impacts any video I make from here on out, because it's now become almost impossible to discuss Luffy in any capacity without referencing his mythical Zoan fruit. So I really do feel bad for anime only watchers on this channel, because I feel like it's now almost impossible to cater for them. But one of the many things I loved about this chapter was the initial full-on body panel we see of Luffy, mimicking the famous pose of the sun god Nika, just without the weapons and of course in front of the moon. I think it's really appropriate that this is the first full shot we see of him, because for a brief while all that we have in our mind brains is the direct connection to the silhouette of Nika. And there's really no better way to showcase the power of this mythical Zoan. And then after making that very clear connection, we can then go on to reintroduce Luffy into the mix. As with most things, this whole Nika fruit revelation does seem kind of obvious in retrospect, especially going back to the days of Jinbei versus Who's Who, which were surprisingly long ago. But back during that fight, Who's Who brought up both the Gomu Gomu no Mi and Nika. So that is Oda there, very sneakily yet painfully clear, invoking juxtaposition. Also, as it turns out, Oda had partially revealed this form in the color spread of chapter 1028, where we see Luffy in what was assumed to be an homage to like Ken from Street Fighter, but now appears to show him with the Nika fire hair and even eyebrows, although they aren't curly here. And I really do want to know your thoughts though. How does it feel to call Luffy a Zoan user? Do you like it? Do you hate it? Do you have no feelings whatsoever? Whatever it is, let me know in the comment place. But it just brings up far too many thoughts, and I've had a lot of trouble getting them straight. I mean, for example, because Luffy has the powers of a god, does that mean that all of his destiny, fate, and inherited will stuff occurred as a result of eating the Nika fruit? Like, is Luffy the chosen one because he ate the fruit, or did he eat the fruit because he was the chosen one? It could go either way, because Nika's powers are so bizarre and vague that you could use them to explain almost every strange thing that's ever happened to Luffy in the series. What I really loved about the chapter is that Kaido has zero reaction to Luffy's new form. He gets grabbed like a fish in a tank and then spun around. He even has his eyes pop out of his head, and none of this has yet to make him go, hold on, something strange is happening here. He's just treating Luffy as per normal, with great relief that his punch-fighting friend is back on his feet so that they can continue to go at it all night long. Here's the really weird thing though. After seeing Luffy completely manhandle Kaido in 1044, for the very first time in One Piece, I genuinely feel like Luffy has the upper hand versus Kaido. He's been inching and inching closer and closer this whole time, and as much as I did genuinely believe his words about defeating Kaido, he had still been consistently a step below the Emperor in every encounter. But this chapter has flipped that, and I'm now wondering how Kaido takes this battle a step further and equalizes with Luffy's cartoony god powers. Then again, I should also note that Luffy's abilities are almost certainly not quite as OP as portrayed in this chapter, because the goal of 1044 was to show Luffy's glorious re-emergence and awakening, and as a result, he was given a lot of favorable moments. Kind of like when the vassals were initially fighting against Kaido and doing very, very well, because Oda wanted to give them their moment. So this fight will undoubtedly become a lot more balanced. But weirdly enough, it's hard to think of an opponent better suited to fighting against cartoon Luffy, because Kaido himself has all of these crazy cartoony drunk forms. And back then, Luffy was even getting mad that Kaido wasn't taking the fight seriously, but he was. That's just how serious mode Kaido engages. And now Luffy has ascended to an even higher level of wacky, and it's so strangely perfect. And I swear, if anyone tries to tell me from here on that One Piece isn't a goofy pirate comic, come on. This is probably the most anticipated power-up in the history of shonen manga, and it essentially turns the main character into a Looney Tune. Of course, just to point out the standard, One Piece does tackle incredibly serious issues, but the overall point of this series is fun, adventure, and being able to smile. So from that perspective, I love that this is Luffy's actual power. And in a lot of ways, this makes Luffy nigh on unbeatable, because if one of the core mechanisms of this power is linked to making people smile, then fighting against Luffy becomes an almost literal battle of ideology. To defeat this particular incarnation of Luffy, you would need to break his will and his ability to smile. And who has ever done that in One Piece? Well, the name Sakazuki does come to mind. He's probably the only example, but it did take the murderment of a brother, and we've only got one of those left, and currently he is very much not on Wano. Speaking of also not on Wano, we did have some fascinating exposition from the 5 elder Ambereddraws. What I enjoy is that they were speaking as if they'd prevented a great challenge from emerging into the world, a challenge which it was preferable to anger Kaido over dealing with. And yet, when it comes down to it, this fruit may never have awakened without their interference. Without the elders ordering Bob Lucci to cockblock Kaido, Luffy would have just activated his final gear 4th and probably just flat out lost. The raid would have failed, and maybe this particular light would have been extinguished from the world. So thanks, world government, we really owe you for saving our butts on this occasion. But apart from the revelation of the fruit itself, the most interesting thing to me about the scene with the elders was the statement that Zoan fruits have a sort of life of their own, which makes sense because when these fruits are eaten by objects, they do bring their own consciousness. And it also plays into the battle between Zoan users and their instincts, like how carnivorous Zoans take on the mentality of creatures, and how awakened Zoans can lose themselves entirely in the mind of an animal. It does make the Zoan fruit sound a lot like the One Ring though, or at least this particular fruit. The Nika fruit has a mind of its own, and it's always trying to get back to its master. It wants to be found. I also do find it pretty hilarious that the world government have been thwarted for 800 years by a literal fruit. Like, they have control of the entire planet, but this one fruit keeps trolling them at every turn. And you know what's the most insane thing of all? I have yet to even mention the words Gear 5th. And it's weird because the existence of Gear 5th almost feels like a secondary aspect of the chapter. Because to me, it's kind of overshadowed by this whole mythical Zoan revelation. Luffy awakens his fruit, he finds some new fun powers, and then he goes, yeah, this can be Gear, which one am I up to? 5th, yeah. Have some Gear 5th right in your filthy dragon face. And again, I think this is absolutely perfect for One Piece, because there were so many theories, some of which I did admittedly engage in, but so many theories about stuff like Monkey Kings and Tigers and all sorts of awesome badass stuff that you would undoubtedly see in any other shonen series. But Luffy's ultimate form is, well, it's essentially Bugs Bunny. And his powers intrigue me to no end, because right now it's almost like he has the potential to warp reality. Because it's not just his body that goes all cartoony and crazy, it's the environment around him, and even Kaido's body that becomes affected by this power. Although I do have to say the very first thing I thought of was Toon World from Yu-Gi-Oh! When Pegasus played it in the series and then all of his monsters just became invincible and blatantly broke the rules of the game. That is what it feels like Luffy is doing right now. And everything is just so surreal. Like, I've read the chapter and I still can't quite process what I saw. Because if someone came to me a year ago and told me that this would happen in the chapter, I would have dismissed it as some kind of absurd fan theory that has 0% chance of ever happening. And it's also something that I can't wait to see animated, which is an unusual statement for me because I'm not Toei's biggest fan. But when your main character quite literally transforms into a cartoon, then the best natural medium to showcase that is going to be animation. And I'm very keen to see how far Oda takes things from here. We've had some classical cartoon gags like Luffy with his Popeye muscles and Kaido with the funny stars around his head. But I wonder what other kind of classical cartoony things Oda has in mind. For example, is Luffy going to show up and drag and seduce Kaido before whacking him over the head with a mallet or something like that? The possibilities are endless, like literally endless, because Luffy has the freedom to do whatever his simple yet sprawling imagination wants to. And I should say I really do like the base design of Gear 5th. All in all, it isn't too bizarre considering everything we've spoken about. Luffy's hair and eyebrows have changed, but it's mostly just him. He even carries over the Gear 4th vapor effect, which I like. Although one change that you may or may not have noticed at first is that his shirt is now white. Or I guess I should say I don't know if it's white, it could be any light color, could even be yellow or gold to tie into the whole sun god motif. But in the manga, the shirt is now white as opposed to being drawn as black. However, the one thing I do definitely know for a fact is that almost 4 months into 2022, we have finally ticked off the very first One Piece 2022 bingo event. Gear 5th has officially occurred. Sadly, it's not in the most helpful position for us to hit that bingo, or as many people insist, hit our bing. However, there is another square that is looking dangerously close to tickage, which is Hiyori defeats Orochi, because they were actually a massive part of this chapter that probably nobody cares about in comparison to everything else, and look, I don't blame them. Very important though, because we do have some developments. Firstly being that Hiyori has taken off her mask and revealed very vividly drawn flowing tears, which is something I speculated on and wait for this, way back in early 2019, when Komurasaki first put on the mask to start playing in Act 2. I said it was probably because she can't play this song without crying, and bam, it only took us 3 years to get there, but here we are. Also, Kanjuro's legacy fire demon spirit thing, I don't know what it is. Whatever it is, it reappeared, and for reasons, it targeted Orochi instead of Hiyori. I'm not 100% or in fact any percent clear on why that was. Like, was the will of Kanjuro just so desperate to return to Orochi that he ignored the command to burn Hiyori? Or is there something else happening here, like perhaps Hiyori controlling the spirit somehow? And I say that because it's not entirely out of the question, because Hiyori did somewhat control Enma, and Enma, as the King of Hell, has a connection to souls and spirits of the dead, so there it is. Or is it something else? I don't know, because I did not write it. That's kind of it for the Hiyori section though. For something that took up 5 whole pages of the chapter, I wouldn't say there were a bunch of major developments, although it was nice to see Hiyori finally let go and confront Orochi like she must have wanted to do for 2 decades now. In miscellaneous news, Sanji is now awake. He got jolted back into consciousness after feeling Luffy's presence or voice or some such. Whatever it is, the cook man felt it. Which is nice because we haven't had an update from him since he fell unconscious after dispatching Queen. But the notable absence here is of course Zoro, and I suppose Frankie actually. Oda is still very much keeping this whole situation a bit of a mystery, and you know what? I don't mind. As much as I felt like I needed to know what was happening with the Reaper ASAP, Oda has very successfully dangled another delicious treat in front of my face, and now I'm too distracted with that Gear 5th treat to care. And we're not done talking about this yet. I'm currently making another video specifically to dive into Luffy's new powers, so you can expect that very, very soon. But for now, here is a different video because there's always more to learn, explore, and experience with this wonderful series, so I look forward to seeing you there.